I'm Alexandra Legui. This is Mindset Unfiltered. Michael Maisey has turned his life around. Brutally and honestly written about in his outstanding book, Young Offender, Michael went through things so tough and tragic, it is truly incredible he is here to tell the tale. Repeatedly a victim of sexual, physical and mental abuse from almost all of the closest grown-ups around him, he fell prey to the claws of drug and alcohol abuse and fell deeply into a life of crime, which resulted in many years in and out of Feltham Young Offenders. He owns a life story full of some of the darkest, toughest and saddest experiences you'd never want even your worst enemy to have to endure. Yet here he is now, out the other side, happily married with 2 kiddies, sober, sharing his amazing story in order to help himself, others, and make a change to the system that repeatedly failed him. He is truly one of the most inspirational people I have ever encountered. He's not only gotten out of that dark world, but he's even able to forgive it and the people involved. He is proof that we can change. Life can change if you want it to. Most of us cling on to a deep bitterness if we had an upbringing we didn't enjoy. Michael Maisey shares a powerful, vulnerable self, and this is a very, very informative chat. Michael doesn't shy away from my probing questions, but answers with honesty, emotion and strength that I found truly awe-inspiring. It was a privilege to spend time with him, and this is a chat I cannot wait to share with you. Under one of his Instagram posts, he writes, "For many years I wore a mask. The tough guy, the know-it-all, the charmer, the bully, the coward, the victim, the addict, the joker. I didn't want to let the world see the real me, as I feared rejection, when I was really rejecting myself, and how I truly felt when I looked in the mirror. I have found that we can only truly connect to others and to ourselves when we are vulnerable. Vulnerability opens the doors to intimacy, and intimacy is what all long-lasting relationships are built on. I choose to welcome all of myself today, the good, the bad, and the shadows." This is Michael Maisey. I read your book, and it's absolutely incredible and heartbreaking and gripping and so eloquently read on Audible as well. Does it still feel very, very raw?
All the stuff that's in the book. Yeah, because the book finishes in 2014 when I get the award from the Metropolitan Police. And I mean, that alone in itself seems like ages ago. And it is ages ago, you know, it's, blimey, 6 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it does seem like a story from a long time ago, but there are moments of sadness that come up every now and again, you know, when I'm doing nice things with my children and I'm giving them all the love, compassion, support that I never got growing up.
Yeah.
You have these brief moments of sadness and memories of a childhood that was tainted with a lot of physical and sexual abuse. So yeah, in that sense, it pops up every now and again, but it does seem like a long time ago, yeah.
I will come back to some of the stuff that you've just said. Firstly, what inspired you then to turn it all into a book?
Well, it was one of them things. When I got sober, I was 25 when I got sober, and there wasn't a lot of 25-year-olds who were sober, let alone 25-year-olds who had the life I had, that had been to prison and had the childhood I had. So as soon as I was like a year sober, there was people saying, would you come and talk in this detox clinic, in this school, in this prison? And so I was going around to all these schools and prisons doing talks. And a lot of people would say to me, you know, you should write a book. You know, this would be a great book. And I just took it as like people just say this just to be nice, you know, like I'm never going to write a book. Like I got no GCSEs. I got not one qualification to my name even today. And, you know, I was like, I can't write a book. And then it was funny. It was a few years later. It was after even after I got the award, I was canoeing just down there on the River Thames with Tom, my mate, who's like a pretty famous actor. And he was like, so how are you getting on with that book, mate? You written a book yet? And I was like, what? I was like, what, you think I should write this book? And he was like, yeah, I think you should, mate. I think even if it only helps one person, you should definitely. And I was like, well, bloody hell, mate. I didn't realise you thought that I should do it. And it was weird. It was like I'd heard it from loads of people, but hearing it from him, someone who'd like achieved all this massive success in his life and he was a mentor for me for many years. It was like, oh, I should bloody, if Tom Hardy thinks I should write this book, I should bloody go and write this book. And so that was it. That's what sort of started this thing of me going, I'm going to try and do it. And even if it helps one person, then, you know, it's a success. So that was the sort of story behind it.
And what has been the feedback? Yeah,
the feedback's been positive. You know, I get messages sort of, you know, I get a couple of messages every day from people who've finished the book just to say, you know, I've been so touched by your story. And it touches people in a lot of different ways. Some people, it's mums whose sons are in prison, or sometimes it's the sons themselves, or sometimes it's people who've just experienced a rough childhood and mental health, and people who've survived suicide as well. You know, there's 2 suicide attempts in there, and people who've attempted suicide and not been successful, survived it. So yeah, the feedback's been positive, really. You know, it's all been positive. I've been really lucky like that.
How hard was it to relive the trauma?
It was so hard. It was really hard. You know, I tried to write the book myself in the beginning, and I couldn't. It was just too painful. And so what I'd done was I got the help from Chrissy Amambi. Chrissy Amambi is my ghostwriter for the book. And she basically lived with me for a week in Devon. She came to stay at our house in Devon. And we just recorded every day. And she interviewed me in a way that probably a journalist would interview someone about a difficult event that they'd observed or witnessed. Like, what time of day was it? What was the temperature? What could you smell? What were the lights in the room? What music was playing at that time? And so it really sort of took me back in a lot of ways. And I remembered things that I had forgot that I even remembered. You know, like just there was a smell when my Uncle Tommy would come into my room at night, and I knew he always used to put his hands over my mouth, but I'd forgot the smell of tobacco from his fingers. He used to have roll-ups. I'd forgot the smell of tobacco until she asked me, and that was one of the things that was like, I'm pretty resilient and tough to this stuff. I can almost tell the story like it's not my own. But there was a couple of moments where Chrissy was like quite emotional herself, and she was like, I have to take a break, because, you know, she couldn't believe what I was telling her. You know, she was just like, I can't. She was just really sad hearing about it.
It's funny. I think we're able to put up barriers for memories in terms of the words and the visuals, but we forget that, or we can't like stop that smell, which is why the smell is such a strong trigger, isn't it, for things, and why it can be either nostalgic or negative or scary, or any of those things. And it's quite a jolt, I think, isn't it? Positively or negatively. It's incredible. I hadn't even thought about that side of it, though.
Yeah, massively. And music as well. That was like sounds that I'd completely forgot about. There was like Red Wine by UB40 was a song that we used to hear, that my mum and her sisters used to play when they were getting drunk. And then also the Wolf Tones. So my uncle used to listen to Irish Republican band called the Wolf Tones. And even as a 3 or 4 year old kid, before the sexual abuse started happening, I knew I'd paired up that when the Wolf Tones are playing, it means he's drunk. And when he's drunk, it means I'm in for it tonight. He's either going to come in and hurt me or do inappropriate stuff. And so, yeah, that was another connection that I'd never really linked up. However, I'd strategically maneuvered through my life by not listening to anything from the Wolf Tones.
Yeah, okay.
You know? So it was like subconsciously I'd avoided the Wolf Tones.
Is that something that you've had to face since, or you will just continue to avoid the Wolf Tones?
I think like now I mean, it's not the type of music I'd listen to anyway. I think if I heard it, I probably wouldn't avoid it, but I wouldn't like seek it out to listen to. But I've healed that wound with my uncle, you know, and I had to, because I was carrying around this hatred that was just like eating me up, really, you know.
How on earth did you go about healing that wound?
Yeah, so the first thing I had to do, because I got to a point where I set up a very successful business and I was living a very comfortable life. Yet every now and again I'd want to do something to tear it all down. And I had to understand why, and understanding why was because I hadn't forgiven myself for all the bad things I'd done. So
like a self-sabotage.
Yeah, it's basically self-sabotage here. And the voice in my subconscious mind was, you don't deserve this, basically. You're just like your father. Why do you deserve it when everyone from your council estate and all the men in your family history never had nothing? What makes you different? Mm-hmm. And so to somehow normalize that, I would try and sabotage all the good progress I made. And so to heal that wound in me, I had to go and find my innocence. I had to, you know, somewhere along the line, Michael was an innocent child of God. You know, I'm not a religious man, but that's what I believe. And when I was born, I wasn't born a bad person. I was just this little kid, you know. And so in that, I found my innocence, and I could see that, you know, when I looked back through my life, it chipped away, and it sort of, you know, I had really difficult years. And then I ended up with this anger and this hatred, and I'd done all this bad stuff. Okay, so if you're innocent, then maybe Tommy was innocent as well. Yeah. And so I had to do the same job on Tommy that I'd done on myself. And I went back to when he was born in a caravan at the side of a road in Belfast, because my mum's side of the family would come from Romany gypsies, and then he was taken into care, and he was abused by priests and nuns all his life, and it was all he knew. Yeah. And so I had to find his innocence, and you know, if I can forgive me, then I have to forgive him. And so, you know, I've forgiven him, and you know, it's just sad that, you know, he was repeating the same stuff that was done to him. But the good thing about this is that the buck stops with me. Yeah. It happened to me.
The cycle can be stopped.
And it stopped, yeah. That will never carry on. That's not going to get passed on to any other children that are close to me. You know, it stops with me.
What is it that you had eventually that Tommy was never able to find?
Well, you know, as is often the case with children that have had traumatic childhoods, they turn to alcohol and drugs. And Tommy was an alcoholic. And I think the one thing that separated me from going down the same path, although I'm not sure if I ever would have, but you can't say, you know, because if I'd have carried on drinking, using alcohol and drugs, God, I'd probably be doing life in prison or dead or killed someone. You know, and I think for me, the luckiest thing, but also the hardest thing, was that I got sober at a very young age. I got sober at the age of 25, when most people were sort of in their prime of partying. I was like going to AA meetings 3 or 4 times a week. And I think that was the foundation for everything I had, is that I had to stop pointing the finger. Yeah, I'd had a shit life. Yeah, I'd had a difficult childhood, but what are you going to do about it? Are you going to just repeat the same patterns and let it ruin your life, or are you going to do something different? And if you're going to do something different, then look in the mirror, because the problem is looking at you in the mirror. You are the problem, you know, and all the answers are within you. And that was it. I had to start looking within, you know, everything that's holding me back, all the stuff I'd learned from my primary caregivers, which was a load of garbage.
Yeah.
And I had to retrain myself as a human being on how to communicate and how to just do the basic things like manners, wash, not resort to violence. Like, you got, like, I grew up in a home where alcohol and drugs were there, violence was there, abuse was there. It was like, you know, I'd find it easier punching someone in their face than to say to them, please don't talk to me like that.
Yeah.
I just found it easier just to go straight to violence.
Take by example, do you? You don't know anything different.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah.
It's interesting because you, throughout your book, every time, because I think you sort of almost came to that realization a few times by the sounds of it to a certain extent, but we're hoping that other people would be your crutch and your life raft. And it sounded like people just kept letting you down, which is why you kept crumbling as well. And at the end, the person that eventually helped you was you.
Yeah.
You didn't have to, it wasn't, you know, you had support from certain other people that you'd managed to eventually get some better support. But ultimately it sounded like that the strength came from you, which I think maybe perhaps because you were so young going through it all, that's such a big thing to have to do for such a young person.
Yeah, I think so. I think when we say it like that, it was the strength within me. Yeah, looking back at it years later, you can say that was strength. But I tell you, in that moment, I did not feel strong.
No.
I felt like my life is crumbling. I just want to go and drink and use drugs again, basically, you know, because that is what my mum had done and that's what my dad had done. So, yeah, I can look back now and be like, wow, I did manage to get through all of that without drinking and using drugs. But in the middle of it, I didn't feel strong. I felt weak. I felt helpless. I felt suicidal at times, you know, because I knew if I drank and used drugs where my life would go, and I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in prison. I didn't want to hurt people anymore. And suicide played a big part, even when I was sober. You know, I was like 2-3 years sober, and I was like, well, what's the point? I've got no qualifications. I've got a massive criminal record. Like, what's the point in all of this? You know, when you're hitting all these roadblocks, you may as well just kill yourself, you know. And
it's quite a rational argument with yourself, isn't it? I think when you get to that point, like you've genuinely evaluated that actually everyone would be better off if I wasn't here. It's not that you're being ridiculous or overly emotional. I think by the time you get to that place, it feels like a genuinely the right thing to do, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I know for me, one of the processes is that I went through before attempted suicide on both occasions, and even considering it when I got sober, was I would search for evidence to support my claim.
Yeah.
I'd search my life for data, comments people made. Oh, well, they said that about you, and he said that, and she said this, and that happened. And you build up a case to be, this world would be better off without you, mate. I'm telling you what, mate, you're nothing but just a burden to everyone. And you build this belief up, you know, and, you know, just thank God I'm still here, geez, because, you know, I wouldn't have done anything that I've done, you know, and it was so close for me, both times where I actually, you know, I was found hanging in a prison cell. And the second time when I cut my wrist, I didn't just cut them across, I dug the knife in and up my wrist. You know, so it wasn't like a cry for help. This was like, I want to die.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, I mean, and that's why, you know, I'm not a religious person, but I do believe in a higher power. And I think something's been looking out for me all this time, because I shouldn't be here. This life I have today was not written for a man like me. You know, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this interview with you, really, you know, but I'm here, and I think something's played a bigger part in all of this.
Yeah. I spoke to a friend of mine, actually, who had tried a few times when he was growing up, and he had the same sort of the same attitude and still did at that point. And he said that he felt guilty. He had like survivor guilt almost,
Right.
because all of his friends around him had either died or were going through such hell, and he felt bad for having come out the other side almost. And I just didn't know what to.
Yeah.
I just had no words to help some. Like, I just don't know what you'd even. I don't know what someone like that needs to hear. I guess in like what advice now do you give to people who come to you and that you deal with who are suicidal?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is that, all of you is welcome. So just welcome all of yourself. Even the bit of you that feels guilty that you shouldn't be here, welcome it. Welcome it, because it's when I try and suppress certain parts but welcome other parts. So I might suppress all the positive, but welcome all the negative. And my thing is like, just all of you is welcome here. All of and all of the bits that are really negative that you might be trying to keep a lid on. It's like, take the lid off, let's get it all out. What does that voice really want to say? Oh, you shouldn't be here, you should be dead, you should be blah, blah, blah. Let's really get it all out. Let's hear. Is this logical? Is this you, or is these just thoughts coming to you? And a lot of the time these are just, crazy thoughts based on crazy stories that your ego's made up from a past event, but it all starts with welcoming yourself and having just one person that you can have an honest, vulnerable conversation with. Yeah. And this is where social media is great. I mean, social media gets a lot of bad press, but the amount of support I've been able to give people since the book's come out, just on messaging through social media, people who I've met up with like 4 months later who've said, mate, you got me out of a really dark spot 6 months ago. And I just, I wanted to meet you and just thank you. You know, it's like when I went to Ireland. We went to Ireland in December, and there was a fella there who I'd messaged called Paul. I won't say his surname, but we were messaging about 6 months prior, and he was in a difficult spot. And I'd done a story on my Instagram to say I was in Dublin. He was like, I'm coming to meet you. And he come and met me and my wife and the kids. And he was like, you saved my life 6 months ago. I was contemplating killing myself. And if you hadn't have kept that conversation going, and I checked back the messages, we were messaging at like midnight. And it's just incredible, how you can be that support for someone else in that moment of darkness, because I think a lot of people who are really in that state of mind don't want to reach out for help. They certainly don't want to pick up the phone and call the Samaritans. They want to do something and speak to someone who has been through it themselves. I think that lived experience is really underrated. We think we can fix a lot of problems by putting someone with a university degree in front of someone who is feeling suicidal. And I think, no, put someone who's come through their own mental health battle in front of that suicidal person. That's much more valuable than any qualification you can get in a textbook.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think there's something about people can be a bit scared about, in quote marks, burdening the people around them, the people closest to them, if they're feeling that much because they feel guilty or bad, that they're loading the people around them. And having a voice like yours, or someone that they don't know, just someone they're also anonymous to an extent, it's an easier share, I would have thought, than telling people around you necessarily.
Yeah. But I completely relate with your friend's dilemma that he went through about the guilt of surviving something. Was he in the military, or he come from a difficult background?
Difficult background. Yeah, I don't think he'd ever done military.
Yeah, because I've met military guys who've lost loads of friends and then come back from war and had this guilt. Why me? Why have I survived? Yeah. And it's very similar to what I had when I first bought, our house in Devon, and we got 10 acres of land. And I grew up in a tower block with neighbours above me, below me, and either side of me. And I had this guilt of like, why you? Why do you deserve this? and this guilt of like, you've left them, you need to go back and save them.
Yeah.
And I think that can be unhealthy, but I think it can be healthy in some ways as well, because I think that definitely is one of the reasons why I set up the CIP project and I run these workshops and retreats, because a bit of me does want to reach back and help people up. And I think you need to, but you need to do it with people that want it.
Yeah.
Not just, willy-nilly to anyone. So yeah, if you want it more than they want it, then it's unhealthy.
Throughout your book, you said that you viewed men as scary and intimidating. And that seemed to be your general association with certainly the father figure, of course. How do you view men now?
Yeah, well, it took a long time to change that. It took, most of my life, all relationships with men were largely negative, and my first proper one was with Sean C., who was my sponsor in AA, who was an Irish man who was just very kind, loving and gentle. And even with him, I still had my guard up, and now it's still tricky, I'm 37 and, I've been sober 12 years, but I still don't trust people easily. I just don't. And that's something that I think is a part of me. It's a part of me that kept me safe for many years as well, because before my 5th birthday, my dad had left and I'd experienced physical and sexual abuse from, most adults I come into contact with. So of course you're going to have this lack of trust in other human beings. And that just carried on right up until my teens. And, you go to prison and there's no moral code in there. Everyone's just survival of the fittest. So even today, I don't trust easily, really, and it's sad, but like I said, I have to welcome that part of myself as well and not put it into the shadows, because, it sometimes can be a negative thing, but it also kept me safe for many years. So, and I'm not a finished product either.
That's what my next question was. It must be it must be an ongoing journey that will probably just keep going forever. Yeah. In the same way that, I have trust issues, it's a daily thing. And almost like what you said about Tommy earlier, that you had to almost go back to what, hurt people, abuse people. That's kind of the structure, unless you break that norm. And so coming all the way back. And I suppose it's having that, allowing that with every situation, with every person that you meet, isn't it? Yeah. Remembering that they have their story there.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't think anyone is fixed. No. I think we're all on our journey. Yeah. And I think when I meet someone who, is claiming to have it all figured out and they're completely fixed and they've ticked every box, it highlights for me how far you've got to go, actually. Yeah. For me, it's an indication of how much work you still have to do. Because I think the people I'm most drawn to are the ones who are like, look, I still don't have it all figured out, and people come to me and message me and be like, you're 12 years sober and, you retired at 35 and you've done all this great stuff. And it was like, yeah, but I still have shit days, and I still have to, exercise, meditate, do breath work, gratitude, support people, support myself, eat well. My happiness is my responsibility. I can't be going to the world with a half empty cup saying, fill my cup up. It's I have to fill my own cup up. Yeah. So, I'm not finished. And, there's a beauty in that as well, because the more I learn, the more I realize how little I know. You get to a point you're like, I feel like I've figured some stuff out, and then you learn a bit more and you're like, there's still so much further to go. So that's the beauty of it,
How much, this is a huge question that can go off all over the place, but what you have learnt about the role of the father must have completely changed your approach to being a father yourself.
Yeah, 100%. For me, my 2 daughters have been my greatest teachers. not always directly what they're teaching me by what they're saying, but in that they've acted a certain way. I've had to go away, read a book, speak to a parenting therapist, and go, okay, what do I do here? Because the solution my mind comes up with is to slap them around the back of the head and tell them to do what they're told. Because that's what I had growing up.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I don't want to do that, but can you give me like an A, B, and a C? So I know, okay, I've got a list of options here I can draw from. And in the middle of that, I've just educated myself so much on being a dad. And it's funny, a lot of being a good dad is being a good husband, because having two daughters, children, they watch and learn and they recreate. And so think about what they're watching. And if you can think about that, then you can think about what they're learning. So, a lot of what we practice in our relationship is like, effective communication with each other and vulnerable conversations with each other in front of them, sometimes staged as well. We'll stage a difficult conversation in front of them so they can see that, we don't have to like pretend everything's all good and rosy, because that's not life. But we also don't have to go to the scale where we're screaming and shouting, but we can sit down and have a difficult conversation with each other. Yeah. To the point where you can feel a little bit of uncomfortable, awkwardness, and that's okay. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, is that you had one sort of school of thought that a childhood should all be rosy and beautiful and protect your kids from anything challenging. And then another one is like, but then they're trying to figure it out because the energy is all off.
And they know.
Yeah. So then you might as well just be screaming and shouting. At least they can go, oh yeah, mum and dad are just angry. And my thing was like, okay, if screaming and shouting is a 10 and pretending everything's okay is a 0, like what does a number 5 look like? And a number 5 is having an honest, vulnerable conversation where we commit to not swearing, not name calling, not raising our voice, but having a difficult, controlled conversation using I statements. So as soon as you start saying you realize, okay, let's just red flag this combo and do it another time. But if you can use I statements, normally you get to the root of the problem really quickly.
Yes. Explain that a little bit more. I like that. It's how something is making you feel, isn't it? Rather than turning it on someone else.
Yeah. So it's basically facts and feelings, So, when you ask me to wash up, that's a fact. If my wife asked me to wash up, I felt like this because of this, and it's like I statement. So an I statement isn't, I think you're a something. That's not an I statement. Yeah. An I statement is, when this happened, I felt this way. And always bring it back to that. As soon as you start, and this is a what triggers me a little bit on social media is people are like, you should do this, you should do that. And it's like, why don't you say it? Speak from I. Like, what do you do? Like, I do this, I think as soon as you start saying you, then automatically you're putting some emphasis, some power onto them, some responsibility onto them. And I think,
and you're expecting them to receive it in a certain way, which is coming from their story, not from your story. So
exactly.
It's up to them how they receive it, but that's not almost always not going to be the same as how you intended to throw it in the first place, be it good or bad.
No, that's right. Yeah, 100%. So I statements are a saving day for me. And then if you're starting this process out, the I statements, because when I first started out in our relationship, it was like funny territory. We're couldn't get it right, and occasionally would go back to raising our voices. And there's a thing called a red flag. Yeah. So a red flag is, okay, stop. We just stop talking now. And call it. If you feel that on the scale of temper you're getting raised, just call red flag. I'm the red flag this because not because of something you said, but because I can feel myself getting triggered, and I don't want to say something that's going to take this down the wrong road. And even the red flag can be tricky. A couple of times my wife called the red flag on me, and I was like, see that bloody red flag.
Yeah.
I'm sick of your red flags. But eventually, after a period of time, you start thinking, okay, I've calmed down. And what did I really want to say? When you said that, I felt really sad. 9 times out of 10, it's because I feel sad.
Yeah.
But
scared.
I'm either sad or afraid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so what I'll give you, if I'm scared, I'll give you anger.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm sad, instead of reaching out vulnerably, like most people do who've had a normal childhood, I never was able to reach out vulnerably and get support in my moments of sadness, because I would normally get hurt. So I would just meet you with aggression there as well, because I was like, I can't be vulnerable and get support here. Look, I've got loads of data from my childhood to support that. If you do that, bad things happen. And so, that's a whole nother sort of process.
My therapist said that with the red flag, she said that a good way of doing it is come up with almost a ridiculous word. So it almost, if you bananas or something instead of something so hard, something so ridiculous.
That's interesting.
So that it diffuses, it sort of oddly diffuses the moment just by the fact that it's just so out of place in the conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
I haven't tried it yet, but I might.
We'll give it a go, because I think the school of thought that I operate from is that really works for me is Carl Jung and the archetypes. Yeah. And the colour red is the direction of the south, because when the sun is at its hottest, it's in the south. It's at midday. It's also the direction of the warrior. Carl Jung, one of the archetypes he believed was a warrior. And the warrior is all about having healthy boundaries. And I think, so when it's a red flag, okay, this is a boundary, stop. Yeah. This is my line. And this is where this conversation stops here. So I think for me, it made logical sense when it was like, it's red and it's a flag. It was like, this is a boundary. This is where this conversation stops. Not completely. We're going to regroup once, we figured our own stuff out. But for now, we're going to both step away from this conversation.
Words can be so hard-hitting, can't they?
Yeah, and once they're out, that's it.
Yeah.
Once they're out, so...
and the maze, in fact, you touched on, there were a few moments where, in your book, like when you met Pauline Quirk, for example, I can't remember what it was that she said, but she offered you a bit of a lifeline, or she said that she had faith in you. Yeah. And you had the same thing later on from Ched, I think, your cellmate. Dread, yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. And he said there was something in there as well. I remember there were like 3 key moments that I remember thinking, that's really interesting, that you really responded to someone saying, I have faith in you. Yeah. And it was interesting, the power of that. Have you heard of a thing called the love languages? Yes. Yeah. So one of my things is being told that I'm doing well. Yeah. Like, because I never got any recognition growing up. No. I just, the only recognition I'd get is if I was doing things bad and I'd get hit. Yeah. And so you develop this negative relationship to getting attention by doing the wrong things, right? And so one of my things is sometimes with my wife, we'll have a check-in and I say, I could really just do with hearing that, like, all of what I'm doing, because I'm doing so much, I'm so busy, that, like, this is all serving us as a family and this is serving something greater. And she'll sometimes just verbalize that to me, just say, look, I think you're doing great. You're helping a lot of people. You're everything we've got, you've paid for, like, and I'm just really proud of you. And it's like, wow, I actually really needed to hear this. Yeah. Because I felt like I was wandering around in the dark for quite a while, thinking, what's the point in all of this? So I think definitely when you look at your childhood, and if there's something that you lacked in as a child, you might need a bit of support in that area from the people closest to you when you get older. I know I certainly have. Yeah. Just being told that
mate, you're doing really well. I'm really proud of you.
For those of you who haven't heard of the love languages, you definitely need to go and have a search.
There's a free quiz you can do online
to find out
what
your
love languages are.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. If you're in a relationship or a marriage, both you and your partner do it, because you realise what your love languages are. And my wife's is acts of service.
Oh, wow.
Acts of service. Unbelievable. And gifts. She likes gifts, but she also likes acts of service. So, which makes sense, because she used to get really triggered when I wouldn't she'd ask me to do the washing up and I wouldn't do it. And she'd get so triggered. I'd be like, why are you getting so, it's just some plates. Why are you getting so, no, you don't get it.
Yeah.
And then we'd done the love languages and we realised, so that's
Makes
why
so
you get
much sense.
You get so triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So now I make a special effort after every meal. I tidy the whole place up.
I wonder if it is to do with what you were lacking as well when you were younger, because I want people to be. It's like being around people. I can't remember what they are. To have a look at them.
Time.
Yeah, I think it is time.
Time is one of them. Yeah.
And I see myself as quite a lone ranger.
Yeah.
And I'm fine, I'm very strong. I'm all of those things, but that's totally because I've built up this sort of powerful wall, I suppose, where I go around going, I don't need anyone.
Yeah, right.
Where in reality, if someone can give that to me, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It ticks all my boxes and it's incredible. But I definitely wouldn't say it to someone. So love languages are
that's
definitely...
what you need. You wouldn't say it.
No.
I just need some time.
Yeah.
With you, not even with,
Yeah.
a lovely dinner, just
No,
time.
just time.
Just time. Yeah. Yeah. That's nice.
Did you keep in touch with Pauline?
I didn't.
Does she know? Because there's now I feel like you need to send her your book.
I'd love to. I should. And do you know what? I probably should.
You totally
I should find her agent and send her a book. I probably should. But that was... I can't remember if that was her or Mary, but Pauline, that was one of the first moments I ever had in my life where essentially the language I heard was like, I believe in you. I actually think you can do something.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid being like, really quite sort of, it gave me some different type of energy I'd never had before. So yeah. I mean, I should send it a bit. That's a good point. Yeah, I'll do that.
Note to self.
Yeah.
What was it about acting that made you so happy?
It was escaping.
Yeah.
That's what it was. The same way alcohol and drugs helped me escape reality when I got older as a teenager. That's what acting done,
Yeah.
I'd have a character who'd have, a completely different backstory, and his lines were very quite chirpy and funny or whatever they were, and for me it was like, I'm not Michael anymore. I'm this guy. And it was always these moments at the end of acting something, there was like a sadness would return over me where I'd be like, shit, I'm back to my life now. And then an addiction to want to go and find another character and play another character. But my acting career was cut short as a kid because you need a chaperone when you're a child actor. And my dad was a heroin addict, my mum was an alcoholic, so it just didn't happen. But I went back years later as an adult, and I felt like I sort of healed that wound, and done a little bit of it again, and I really enjoyed it again. It's great fun.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what's your mum's situation now?
Yeah, so mum is 18 years sober. She's...
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. She 18 years sober, and she's getting divorced again from my stepdad Pete, who you would have read about in the book. And she's heavily involved with a company called Clear Mind International. Clear Mind do lots of self-development workshops and stuff like that. And she's just a fine example of, for me, she's a fine example of someone who can change. She's gone through a lot of stuff. Yeah, she didn't go to prison like I did, but she had a very difficult upbringing, raised by nuns and priests, experienced lots of difficulty in her childhood. And then, you know, at the end of my mum's drinking, she would be on like the park bench with drinking cans of cider with like street drunks, you know. And now she's like 18 years sober, a really respectable woman who helps other women as well. So, yeah, I'm super proud of her.
World, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. She's
so good.
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm so proud of her. So proud of my mum. You know, incredible. And out of all her brothers and sisters, she's the only one who's sober. She's the only one. I think she had like 15 brothers and sisters, I think, in Ireland. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. And I got 15 from my dad as well.
Jeez.
Yeah. Like to breed.
Yeah.
It's not me,
Irish.
Yes, the Irish. That's it. It's the Irish.
Do you think that, like, it took a long time for you to link alcohol with the negative things that were happening in your life? Is that a massive part of dealing with alcoholism?
I think for me, alcohol and drugs, they were just medicating the pain, really. You know, like the same way acting did a little bit. That was just like my medication to help me deal with the pain, emotional discomfort. You know, and carrying this around in a world where, you know, we grew up on a council estate in Isleworth. You'd go into Twickenham and Richmond and you'd see people who had a mortgage, mum and dad were still together and had a lovely life. And I couldn't understand why people could walk around and smile and laugh and be happy. And I carried around this pain within my soul that felt like I was dragging a whole weight on my shoulders. And then I discover acting, and it's like, this guy doesn't have any of that baggage. Oh, great. And then I discover alcohol and drugs, and it's like another thing of letting it all go, you know. But the journey for me in getting sober was, and this is the beauty of getting sober as well, is when you can't self-medicate and the pain hits you, it's like, yeah, now you need to look at this pain. You can't run from this pain anymore. You know, now it's here, it's in your face, and it's screaming at you. So, and it always goes back to the childhood, you know, always, all the time for me, it goes back to the childhood. You know, they say there's a lot of research now into children's brains are primarily wired up in their first 6 years. And I think of everything I went through in my first 6 years, and a lot of it, for me, healing the man I am today is healing the 6-year-old boy that I was back then. Yeah. That's who needs to be healed. And I just have to welcome all of him as often as I can. Even when he's kicking off and wants to scream and shout, is just get down to his eye level and give him a cuddle. You know, what did he need then? He needed love, compassion, patience, kindness. Okay, can I be compassionate, kind and loving to myself today? Yeah. You know, okay, what would that look like? Have you eaten well? Have you drank water? Have you exercised? Have you meditated? No. Okay, we'll go and do some of that stuff and be kind to yourself. So true, those fundamentals. Yeah, it's so simple, yeah. Always go back to them basics. It never lets me down, you know. So, yeah. Even down to, like lack of sleep. I mean, geez. Yeah. That's it. It's amazing. Like suddenly you thought you could control the chimp brain for a few days, and then you have a few bad nights sleep, and then that's it. You're fooked. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That'll do you. Lack of sleep every time. Later on, you talk about when you were starting to give up alcohol, and you were struggling when people were drinking around you. Mm-hmm. How important is that for someone who's trying to give up alcohol, to be around people who are not drinking? Yeah, I think everyone's got their journey with this, you know, and I think my journey is my journey, and that's what's worked for me. But I know I've met people who have got multiple years of sobriety and they've done it a completely different way. So I think the important thing is to find your way, but I think you need to know where your limits are. So if you're new to getting sober and you're going out with people, and maybe you get to like 3 months sober and you end up relapsing because you're with this group of people, then you need to put a boundary in with yourself in like, I can't be around this group of people because I always end up relapsing. And also if that group of people aren't supportive of you being sober, so if whenever you're out there trying to get you to have a drink or take drugs, they're probably not the right people to have around you. So it comes back to having healthy boundaries with yourself. You know, like what boundaries do I need to have in my life? I need to maybe, that person needs to be back there. This person is allowed full access into my life. That person isn't. And I need to not put myself in certain situations and certain places, you know, and that's what worked for me. You know, it was hard because at 25, I pretty much cut out every friend, you know.
Yeah.
And it was lonely. But in the middle of that, I had all this room to learn about myself and grow as a human being. And that's what I filled it with. And then when I'd done that, I started attracting new people into my life who are on a similar journey of self-development. You know, and over the years, just this is how it works. If you're really doing the work on yourself, is that as you change, you outgrow people. It doesn't mean that person's a bad person and you're right and you're wrong or any of that stuff. It's just like, we're at very different stages in our lives now, you know, and I had it with, you know, people I was friends with in recovery, you know, like I got to like sort of 8-9 years sober, and the people who I got sober with, a lot of them still have the same problems they had when we were 1 year sober, and I don't have them problems anymore. So naturally you're going to outgrow people like that. And that becomes, you know, a sad part of growth, but also a good part, because as certain doors close, new doors open, and I've welcomed in some beautiful new people into my life over the past 2 or 3 years. People who for me will cheer you on when you're winning, which I had a lot of people who weren't cheering when I was winning, and it was because I believe they had a negative relationship with letting their own light shine, and so when they see someone else letting their own light shine, they want to tear that person down because they're making them look even less bright. And the people I have around me today are all push you higher, turn your dimmer switch up, keep shining, shine brighter, keep shining. And that's what you want. That's what a true friend should be doing. It should be cheering you on and encouraging you to shine your light brighter, because, you know, we're in a world where the world's pretty fucked and we need hope. Yeah. So give people hope.
Which person would you have been when you were younger if someone around you was the you now?
You mean if I met someone like me back then?
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know, it's hard to get my head around that, because I know the first thing I would be doing is I'd probably struggle to trust anything that they say. Yeah. And so it would take me a while to warm to them. And so that's why whenever I do these workshops in prisons, I always factor this into it. Yeah. You know, like I was in Swaleside prison last week. I ran a 1-day workshop in there with a group of about 15 lifers, all doing 20 plus years. Wow. There's one guy in there he's been in there 20 years and he's still got another 20 to do. So he had a 20-year sentence, killed someone in prison. He's got another 20 to do. Jeez. And you know, we have this whole 1-day workshop planned out, and the prison guards know what we're going to do, and you have to give people a rough idea of what we're going to do. But I say I also need to have flexibility in this room, that if I don't feel this container is safe, I don't feel that they really trust me, I'm not going to take them on this journey. No. And so we spent, you know, the best part of 2 hours of me sharing my story, and I open it up for Q&A. I'm like, if you got any questions, let's ask. And a lot of that is them just sizing me up. They're like, what prison were you in? And what wing was you on? And how long was you in for?
How hard are you?
Yeah. And they're really trying to figure out, did you just do like 1 week in prison? Is that really what it is? Or do you really know the drill? Yeah. And then, you know, when they hear it all and they're like, no, this guy is one of us. Yeah. He is one of us.
That's such an odd balance of trying to win over their respect in the same way that you would have done when you were in prison. Yeah. Yet then be like the flip side because you're one of the good guys.
Yeah.
And that's someone that they don't like or they're scared of.
Yeah, this is it. This is it. And I think the thing that with all of the stuff that I do is that it's voluntary. So you don't have to be here.
Yeah.
So like, you don't want to be here, mate?
Go.
There's the door.
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
Like, don't bother me. You know, I'm not a prison guard. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a counsellor. I'm not a therapist. I'm an ex-convict, ex-drug addict who's turned my life around, who's here to help you. Like, you don't want to listen to it, you can go back to your cell, mate. It's fine. And as soon as you put that out into the room, they all want to listen. They all are like, okay, this guy means business. He's, you know, it's not the usual protocol. And, you know, also in the middle of that is then allowing them time, as long as it takes, even if it takes 3 or 4 hours, even if it takes the whole day, allowing them enough time to trust me.
Yeah.
Like, how long is it going to take for these men to trust me? And some men, it takes an hour. Some men, it can take a year. You know, and I think if I had have come into my life back then, I probably would have been one of the kids that it would have took me a lot longer than the average person. You know, but because I can spot that in certain men, and if I could have spotted it in me, I would have, you know, just given myself a little bit more compassion, a little bit more patience, and also a little bit more attention. I hate to say it, but I'm often drawn to the most complicated, dysfunctional prison inmates when I go in there, because I'm like, I just see myself, you know. So
yeah, must be some sort of familiarity there.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
you had. I mean, it's such an interesting flip, isn't it? Because I mean, you had people. I know at one point, I've got names and everything. I can't remember who he was though. Who came? One of the policemen actually sat down and gave you quite a good pep talk.
Yeah,
but you wouldn't have taken it. So why? What would you have needed then to have listened to that? Because that's essentially what you're trying to do now, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is the funny thing, right? And this is how I believe we're stuck in the dark ages with this stuff.
Yeah,
is that we've got people running workshops, trying to help other inmates rehabilitate, who've never rehabilitated themselves.
Yeah.
So if you think about this, you do a lot of the racing stuff, yeah? If you're a young lad and you want to become a professional racer, yeah? And you had access to anyone in the world, you'd probably hang out with someone like Lewis Hamilton, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You'd think he'd be a great guy to help me get where I want to go.
Yeah.
Now, when you go to prisons, we've got all these people paid a lot of money to help people rehabilitate. But no one's rehabilitated. No one's got a clue what it takes to rehabilitate yourself.
That's absurd.
You know, and so that's the problem. It's like, you think if you want to be a professional footballer, someone like Man United will take you in and you'll be surrounded by other people who've gone on that path and give you guidance on what it's going to take.
Yeah.
You go to prisons and there's no people like me aren't even consulted by the prisons on what they think needs to happen.
That's unreal.
And then, well, this is why the prison's in such a poor state as it is.
And is that a system that can be changed?
Well, this is the thing. I'm
part of your journey.
I will change it in my lifetime. My lifetime, things will change. I've already made a massive change in that direction anyway. I'm already in prisons delivering workshops now.
Yeah. So
I am making a change. But I believe by the time I'm gone, prison will be a lot closer to becoming a place where your life is improved, not made worse. That's what I believe. At some point before I die,
that's your purpose.
There'll be prisons where you go in and you learn so many skills of self-development that when you leave, you can just go and have a much better, happier life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to take a while, but I'm on the road.
Overall, your understandably, your natural thing that would come out was rage, and anger and rage. What do you do to control rage now if it flares?
Yeah, so for me, I don't really get angry now. That left me a long time ago, but it left me when I'd done all the work on myself. And I think what I had to do, and it all started with this question: why are you angry? Why are you angry? And when I really answered that question honestly in a room with a therapist, and then I opened it up to group therapy, why are you angry? Everyone was like, you deserve to be angry. It's right. What happened to you takes a piss. It's not all right what happened to you. You deserve to be angry. And that was like one of the first stages to diffusing my anger, because a lot of my anger, why it was at a level 25, if it was on a scale of 1 to 10, it was like way off the Richter scale, was that not only am I angry, what makes it worse is that no one understands why I'm angry. And then when I shared it with a therapist and I shared it with a group, it was like, yeah, I get it. We get it. We'd be angry too. If that was us, if that was the life we had and this happened and that happened, like we'd be angry too. And it was like, yeah, maybe the world does understand. Maybe this is, and then slowly like finding everyone's innocence. So I was angry with a lot of people, but if I was able to forgive myself and find my own innocence, then how can I be angry with anyone else? Surely they're all innocent, and maybe life's chipped away at them as well. And so, yeah, it was a case of like, again, all my anger come from my childhood, and if I can forgive myself and find my own innocence, so that means everyone else is innocent too, And it was a really interesting point in my life where, about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a couple of guys who I was friends with, and a couple of guys I was supporting, because I do bits of mentoring with young men who had their own anger problems. And occasionally we would talk and they would be expressing their anger on the phone to me. And I'd get off the phone and I wouldn't be angry, but I would feel something pumping around my veins, like low level, something was pumping. And I was like, I really don't like this. I really don't like how I feel after just hearing someone on the phone saying, I'm going to effing do this and I'm going to do this and rah, 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 rah. And really having the courage to say, I'm not okay with that anymore. I'm up for helping support you come back to a place of peace and tranquility. But if you're going to ignore all my advice and call me up a week later still raging, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your rage. I don't want to hear what you're going to do to this guy or that guy or her or whatever you're going to do. I don't want to hear it. Because when you put the phone down, I'm left with this sort of like feeling of, it's like toxic. And that was like one of the things for me is like, wow, I really have changed. Is not only do I not want to experience that in my life, I also don't want too many inputs of other people's unfiltered, unprocessed aggression as well. So yeah, that's a long answer.
Dude, how aware are you of the people that you grew up with and where they are now?
Yeah, so apart from Facebook, really, I don't really have much contact with a lot of them.
Is that a choice thing as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me is like, I spent a long time trying to help a lot of people, and I got burnt a lot, and that was my fault, because I cared too much. I cared.
You've probably become a very good empath, but too much.
It was too much.
Yeah.
It was too much. I cared about them getting sober more than they cared about getting sober.
Yeah.
And then it became an unhealthy balance. And, again, it was my guilt. You have to help them. Look how good your life is. You think you're just going to ride off in the sunset and take all this money with you.
Yeah.
You go back and you help them. Yeah. And for them, it was just like, tell me what I want what I want to hear, and just keep things flowing. I'd give them a bit of work here and there, and keep them ticking over. And really, it was a payoff for me. So I was helping and giving back, and the payoff for me was that I don't feel so guilty about everything I have. So it was sneaky, really. It was quite manipulative, but it came from a good.
I think that's really normal, though.
Yeah, of course, yeah, but it dressed up as a thing that I'm doing a noble thing, So, but and it was getting to a point where I had to be really honest with myself and be like, if this was a normal person on the street who was doing this, or it was a normal person, how would you treat them? Well, of course, I'd be like, they're not ready to change. So what am I banging my head off the wall for? And so then, I had to apply the same thing. Because a lot of people, they see me and they see the house, the car, the business, they see all this stuff and they're like, I want it. And I'm like, yeah, you don't really, mate. Because when it gets hard on a Friday night and everyone's on the piss, you want to go to the pub as well. And you can't do both.
Yeah.
So a lot of people want to change, but they don't really want to do the hard work of really looking in the mirror and becoming accountable, because it's difficult. Change is difficult. Yeah. And so for me, a lot of people, apart from we stay friends on Facebook and Instagram, they're not in my life. They're not actively in my life, and I keep my circle very small. Yeah. And I think that's important because often if you're giving too much out to friendships, you're often neglecting the most important relationship, which is the one with yourself and the one with your wife and kids. So keep the circle small and give as much energy and time to them relationships that really matter.
How tough was SAS? Who dares wins?
SAS Who Dares Wins. It was tough. It was a brutal experience.
Because I can't imagine it kind of tested you mentally any more than you'd ever been through. Like, you must have had that mental strength there, like, tenfold.
Yeah, I felt so. I mean, I felt like I was, there was a couple of things where I sort of done it reasonably easy. Like the sort of, I'm terrified of heights. I don't even go on funfair rides, and I went down that mountain and I didn't make a big deal out of it. And I had Ant Middleton screaming all sorts of names in my face, I think they looked at my record and thought, we'll keep pushing his buttons, he'll blow and it will make great TV. And I didn't blow. So I felt like it was fine. But I think having gone away and watched the show and watched what the show stands for, it's almost like the opposite of what I stand for. And, and I think if I could go back, I probably wouldn't have took part in that show because... Right. I go into prisons, and I have done for a long time, and my thing in prisons is about teaching what does healthy, mature masculinity look like. So how do you not bully someone? Yeah. How do you not tear someone down emotionally? How do you not resort to violence? And I think that TV show, especially, Ant Middleton in a lot of ways, unfortunately, I believe, my opinion is that he stands for toxic masculinity. I will scream at you and hurl abuse at you and break you down mentally, emotionally, physically.
Yeah, whether it's part of the theatre and whether or not is actually irrelevant, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean the last series that aired, I watched it, and there was a part where the interrogator screamed in a woman's face, calling her, the C word, and I was like, I just don't agree with this. No. I don't agree, and I don't think it's all right because I know somewhere there is a wife suffering from domestic abuse and her husband is doing that to her. Yeah. And what we're doing by putting it on our screens and watching it is we're saying it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know this is an interrogation thing, but for the man who is violent towards his own wife, he doesn't understand this is just a TV show. Yeah. He just sees, well, they're doing it here, then I can do it in my own living room. Yeah. And so, I don't agree with a lot of it, unfortunately. And I get the argument, because I've had this conversation with a couple of people to say, well, you need that aggression to win wars and you need it and I'm like, and my argument is that I just have a question mark over whether what we're doing as a whole is working. Because if our aim is to stop terrorism, is it working? because everywhere I see there is terrorism everywhere now. And I don't know if the training we're putting these men through and sending them into these war zones, whatever's happening there, I don't think is we're getting what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
If we're aiming for a peaceful existence on planet Earth, that's certainly not what we're seeing everywhere. No. And it's not the soldiers' fault. It's the guys in the government who are going, train that guy to go and do that. So the soldiers are just following orders. And to compound that even worse is the soldiers come back from these war zones completely fucked up mentally and either end up committing suicide or they're homeless. Mm-hmm. So for me, the whole system is just a shambles. And I think the TV show SAS Who Dares Wins represents a lot of stuff that, I just don't agree with and I just don't stand for, which is toxic masculinity. I don't think you should shout abuse at anyone and tear anyone down. And I think it's, when I left the show, because this is the other part of it, is when you leave the show, they take your armband off you and you're marched out and you're taken to the airport, you're flown out of the country. And at no point does anyone call you up to say, so this is what happened. When you done this, you didn't do this well, you didn't do that well. And so it resulted in why you've left. So you never know why you left. Wow. And that rejection, because ultimately what you're dealing with is rejection.
Yeah.
You're not good enough. You didn't make it. But you're being judged by someone who, has a warped sense of reality. Someone who their job was to kill lots of people.
Yeah.
And so when I think of like the man I am today, of course I was never going to do well because I'm not a killer. All the work I've done on myself is to be a loving, kind, good man. I think probably, it was the right thing that I went when I did because, I wouldn't make a good special forces soldier.
No.
I couldn't kill someone and go and put my head on the pillow at night. I just couldn't.
No.
Not now. Maybe when I was younger. But not now. I think I would. I've got too much respect for life and too much respect for humanity. I think we're all underneath it all. We're all good people, really. Yeah, there's a lot of bad in the world, but I think if you search for the good, there's a lot of good as well.
Do you forgive yourself?
Yeah.
Good. Do you feel proud of yourself?
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard because it's like, wow. I still pinch myself sometimes especially when I go walking out on my land in Devon and we live up on the Blackdown Hills and you can see for miles and it sometimes it's like, how did I get here? How did this happen to me? This is just, it's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and it just reconfirms for me that, it would be very easy for me to just ride off in the sunset now. I live in Devon, 10 acres land. The kids go to private school. I'm a very comfortable life. But that would also be the most selfish thing I could do because there's not many of me's around who've had my life and turned it round. And I have to go back. It's my moral obligation. I have to go back. And I think really that's what fueled SAS, my application to go on to SAS Who Dares Wins. Was, it can help show people that you can have Ant Middleton screaming abuse in your face. And I might have done all these things, but I don't resort to violence anymore. And the message is there that you can change. But, of course, I never got to show any of that because, I left the process sort of about halfway through. But it's about giving back. That's what I believe. My moral obligation now.
And so what else are you doing at the moment then? What's the future for you?
Yeah, so I run workshops and retreats. One of the retreats I run is on my land in Devon. And I set up a company called the CIP Project. And we basically...
Of which you have a podcast as well.
We've got the CIP podcast.
Yeah.
And the CIP Project combines... Because I do workshops in prisons, workshops in colleges, workshops in schools... my own retreats on my land as well. And so I just combined it all into one. And so I've got that. I've got my estate agency business. I've got the book. We're talking about book number 2. And I filmed, one of my workshops was filmed not that long ago, about a month ago, by one of the major production companies in the UK as well. So that's being pitched at the minute to BBC. So potentially there could be a TV show coming as well. So yeah, that's it really. And just being a dad as well. You know?
Full-time job in itself.
Yeah, it's great. That's, that's where the gold is for me.
Yeah.
Everything else is great, all the material stuff, but the real gold is being a good dad and a husband. That's a real gold. And you don't need money to do that.
This is a $1 million question, one that everyone will have asked you and one that's impossible to pin down, but potentially you'd have thought about it. Have you got any words of advice for life? For life,
for anyone?
Yeah.
For me, all the answers are within. And so I think if you're struggling with anything in life, anything, look in the mirror. That's where the answers are. Always look in the mirror. Always come back to that. Now, you might need the help of a therapist or someone who's walked that path before you, but find someone who's gone down that road and can take you down that road as well. And it's all about looking within. Whether it's mental health, addiction, everyone I talk to is like, you just have to be willing to, look at the darkest parts of yourself that you don't want to look at. The bits that you've kept hidden away, all the skeletons in the closet, get it all out and examine it and pick it apart and pull the bones out of it. And, what happened at this point in my life, which gave me the beliefs that I still carry today. And for a lot of people, the beliefs are essentially, I'm not good enough, or I have to do this to get love. I have to act like this or look like this or speak like this to get love. So yeah, for me, always the advice I give is, seek people out who've walked the path before you and look within.
Anything else that you want to say?
No, apart from, keep doing what you're doing, and thanks for inviting me on. And, anyone who heard anything on this podcast that they found tricky and they want to talk to me about, find me on Instagram. I'm really active on my DMs and I'll respond back.
Is that the best way of contact? Michael Maisey?
Yeah, on Instagram, yeah.
I'll put all the links in underneath in the blurb. And thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your experience and being so very, very open as well.
Thank you, Alex.